Since Bill Skarsgård's Pennywise danced onto the screen, we've seen him thoroughly terrorise the children of Derry, but the evil clown had some even more horrifying versions and scenes you never got to see. Yippee-ki-yay, movie lovers, it's time to float as I reveal the most disturbing deleted Pennywise moments and designs. Obviously, spoilers ahead. Welcome to Derry's co-showrunner Jason Fuchs has revealed there was a deleted scene of Pennywise masquerading as Mike Hanlon in It Chapter 2, which inspired a similar moment with Matty in the prequel series. Originally in the movie, the adult Mike who'd stayed in Derry to research the origins of It invited the losers back, then took them all down into the sewers. Once deep inside, they discovered a starved, bedraggled Mike being held hostage, and the Mike they'd been with all this time was in reality a manifestation of It. The filmmakers ended up rejecting this idea as they felt it didn't do justice to the real Mike Hanlon, who would have only appeared briefly in the final act of the film. Plus, it would have been a huge change to Stephen King's original story. The concept was retrofitted though for Welcome to Derry, where Matty turns up unexpectedly and seemingly reveals he survived his encounter with the baby demon. He then tells his friends that one of the kids from the movie theatre attack survived and is still in the sewers. Once they all get down there, the gang discover all the kids' dead bodies, including Matty's, and it turns out that Pennywise has lured them to his lair instead. There's an intriguing early human version of Pennywise that was actually filmed and shown in test screenings for Chapter 1. The scene was set in 1637 in a building called the Well House, which later becomes a house on Newbolt Street. In the deleted scene, Pennywise terrorises a mother and her child by shape-shifting into various forms in front of her, and then threatening to eat her, her baby, and all of her other children. Pennywise then makes a bargain with her that if she looks away and stares into the fire while he eats her baby, he will spare her and the rest of her family. Driven mad by the Sophie's choice she has to make, the mother gives up the baby, and as she stares into the flames, we hear a cry cut short by the crunching sound of Pennywise feasting on the child. The mother becomes hypnotised by the flames, which are revealed to be the deadlights. Director Andy Muschietti said the scene showed the origin of what he calls the fog, or how adults in Derry look away and forget the horror of the town's atrocities. The deleted scene was alluded to in the first movie via the painting in the town library of a woman carrying her baby to a well, and was also heavily rumoured to be in Welcome to Derry, but didn't end up included. Chapter 2 originally had a much longer scene of Beverley's horrifying encounter with Pennywise when he masqueraded as the elderly Mrs. Kersh. Concept art by Vincent Proce reveals a deleted scene of Mrs. Kersh actually transforming into the enormous grotesque witch that attacks Beverley. The plan was that Bev would see the tea-drinking old lady turn into a many-mouthed monster in front of her eyes. These early designs for the witch look even more terrifying than the one that ended up on screen. Welcome to Derry reveals that Mrs. Kersh is Bob Gray's daughter Ingrid, and her interactions with Pennywise are probably how she ended up with the wounds we see on her chest in Chapter 2. There's another deleted moment with Bev after she runs out of the building and into the street, which would have shown her being taunted by a bright red balloon with the words "Sweet dreams, Bevy." There's a similar scene in the book and 90s TV miniseries, where after rushing out of her old house, Bev is almost hit by a truck and then is freaked out when a yellow balloon appears out of nowhere. Watching Pennywise transform into a giant spider clown was pretty awesome in Chapter 2. Still, part of the terrifying realism of the spider clown comes from the fact that Bill Skarsgård filmed these scenes in a motion capture suit so that the CGI monster retained many of the actor's facial features. And although it was pretty freaky seeing Pennywise's head and torso attached to giant sharpened spider legs, early concept art revealed in the World of It book shows a different design that also gave the hybrid monster some disturbingly long human-like arms that had fingers not just on the hands but running all the way up the arm, giving it a kind of caterpillar style look. In this design, it seems like It was grabbing either Richie or Eddie, in a similar way the It spider did to Eddie in the TV series. We've seen Pennywise transform himself into some pretty gross beings to terrorise the losers, such as the rotting diseased leper that attacked Eddie outside the Newbolt house. However, an unused design for the spider clown gave Pennywise a rather vicious set of teeth on his derriere, in what the concept designer Vincent Proce called the Pennywise arse mouth. The way this worked is that the upper parts of each of Pennywise's main 4 spider legs had hidden jaws with grinding teeth that when put together formed what was effectively a lethal mouth in the creature's butt. Then when Pennywise trapped a victim below him, the jaws would open up to attack. Just imagine if we'd seen that in the final film, it would probably have spawned a whole series of memes to rival even Pennywise the Dancing Clown. Another very creepy, unused design for the final Pennywise spider had the clown's head wedged in the stomach of a big body. Above the clown's head was a disturbing skull with outstretched arms. Then, rather than well-defined spider legs, this monster had a mass of tentacle-like appendages below. And there's another surreal creature design with tentacles as well as claws, which give it the feel of some kind of gross underwater hybrid monster. There's something of a baby-like quality to these designs as well, which makes me think of the awesomely horrific baby bug creature that emerges from one of the fortune cookies to terrify the losers at the Chinese restaurant. And these unused Chapter 2 designs may well have influenced Welcome to Derry's horrific baby demon monster. Another set of unused Pennywise spider designs seem to tip their hat to the spider version of It from the TV miniseries. The body's thicker on these designs than the final version in the film, and this particular shot of the spider raised up on its legs exposing its abdomen reminds me of how the TV spider revealed the deadlights to the losers in the final showdown. That was also the monster's weak spot and the place where the losers pulled out its beating heart to defeat the evil entity in the miniseries. While developing the first movie, there was a moment when Muschietti considered having Pennywise transform into Freddy Krueger, the razor-clawed villain from A Nightmare on Elm Street. Freddy was already a popular horror figure in the 80s when Chapter 1 was set, so it could have been an appropriate fear for one of the losers, but the director decided against it in the end, saying that it didn't feel right. I wanted to bring fears that were a little more layered and related to childhood trauma and more surprising in general. Including Freddy would have been possible as New Line owned the rights to both franchises, but Muschietti thought it would have been a bit too meta, which makes sense given both Pennywise and Freddy are iconic horror characters in their own right. In Chapter 1, Mike Hanlon first encounters Pennywise when he goes to make a delivery to a butcher's shop in Derry, and he sees the clown's evil yellow eyes from behind a plastic curtain in the meat storage area. But there's some behind-the-scenes footage of a different scene where Pennywise is shown thrashing around and feasting on meat or perhaps a body behind the plastic screen. Now, this scene of Pennywise devouring a body at the butcher's would perhaps have added more shock value to Mike's first encounter with it, but I think the reason this moment may have been cut is that if you notice to the right of Pennywise, there's a yellow figure which gives the impression it might be Georgie hanging in his yellow raincoat. In the final film, Georgie has gone missing but no body has been found, so Bill continues to believe his little brother could still be alive, which is a major motivation for him throughout the movie. Watching the once powerful spider clown Pennywise shrink into a melted baby version of himself during his death scene was quite a sight to behold, and reminded me in some ways of an infant Benjamin Button. But before the filmmakers arrived at that final look for Pennywise during his last moments on Earth, there was almost going to be a version where we would have seen baby Pennywise's still oversized head covered in a grotesque mass of eyes. The inspiration behind all those eyes on the spider clown could be the fact that real-life spiders have multiple eyes. And it might have been even creepier if those eyes also had Pennywise's signature creepy wall-eyed look, shifting some of them in opposite directions to the others. There's also some more concept art in the World of It book of regular Pennywise with extra eyes in his forehead and also running along the sides of his jaws when he opens them to reveal the deadlights, and that too is truly the stuff of nightmares. Also revealed in the World of It book is an alternate version of the flashback scene where Ben is taunted by Pennywise masquerading as Bev. In the final film, this happened back at school, but originally it was going to take place at the quarry, and linked to this, there's some deleted footage of adult Ben walking around the quarry by himself, which also never made it into the actual movie. The book reveals that stunt double Sierra Jones took the place of Sophia Lillis and wore burn makeup for the flaming head scenes, and it also tells us that in the alternate quarry set version of that scene, after Bev set her hair on fire, Pennywise's hand would have also burst out of her chest holding Bev's beating heart. Beverley also had an extended scene with the Mrs. Kersh water monster that she encounters when the losers enter the cistern just before they go into Pennywise's lair. The monster drags Bev underwater and the other losers dive in to help her out. However, there's deleted footage of the battle underwater with the monster in the trailers. Jessica Chastain apparently injured herself performing the stunt for this scene. A weirdly mesmerising transformation for Pennywise that Andy Muschietti wanted to include was called the Concentric Nightmare. In the World of It book, Muschietti describes this unsettling look as like a sock being turned inside out. Accompanying the sketch of this Pennywise monster are additional faces and eyes that the monster's head would seem to transform into. Before arriving at the final look for Bill Skarsgård's Pennywise, director Andy Muschietti made a sketch in 2015 of what he thought the murderous clown should look like. That sketch formed the basis for a set of concept art by Daniel Carrasco, and although some of the features of these early designs, such as Pennywise's red and white makeup, were kept, other parts were scrapped, and instead Muschietti opted to give the villain some more pronounced baby-faced features such as big eyes and apple cheeks, as he felt the contrast of the character's childlike features and his terrifying behaviour would make him all the more disturbing. Although these early designs are very cool, a young child would have likely run a mile as soon as they set eyes on such a clown. Skarsgård's Pennywise, with his cherub-like cheeks, thick lips and more carefully manicured hair, is less immediately haunting in its appearance, which is part of what helps it lure children into its gruesome traps. Chapter 2 originally had a scene where Mike was taunted by Pennywise when he visits the burned out building where his parents died. At the time, the town of Derry thought that Mike's father had set fire to the building on purpose because he'd lost his mind. You can see a hint of this in the actual movie, where Mike's in the library looking at a newspaper headline that claims his parents were crackheads. In the deleted scene, when Mike returns to the building, he encounters Pennywise, who shows him the burnt corpse of a little girl who also died in the fire, and the evil clown tries to make Mike feel even guiltier by claiming his parents were to blame for the girl's death. It would have been great to see this cutscene because all the other losers visited a place from their childhood and had an encounter with Pennywise during the film, but this barely happened for Mike other than that tiny flashback after which he was attacked by adult Henry Bowers. Cary Fukunaga has a script credit on it and was the first movie's original director before he quit over creative differences with the studio, which led to the Muschietti siblings taking over as the movie's director and producer. Muschietti's movie was still partially based on Fukunaga's screenplay, although many of the more graphic scenes were either toned down or cut from the final film. One example of the more shocking tone that Fukunaga was going for was Stan's first scene at the synagogue. In the final film, Stan has an unsettling encounter with it in the form of a strange woman from a painting. However, in Fukunaga's script, Stan excuses himself from the rabbi as he needs to go to the toilet, and when he can't find the bathroom, he decides to go inside the mikveh, a place for ritual cleansing used, for example, by women after their period. As he's about to pee in the pool, a naked woman rises out of the water and starts to tempt him while she touches herself. However, she's actually a rotting, bleeding corpse covered in sores, and as she emerges from the water, she says to Stan, "Come float with me." Also in the final movie, there's a scene where Bev's father appears to be about to sexually assault his daughter, something it's implied that he's done in the past. But in Fukunaga's screenplay, there's little room left for doubt. For example, in his script, Bev's father throws her into his bedroom, demands to know whether she's still a virgin and orders her to undress, and then begins to talk in a Pennywise voice. "You'll like it, Bevy, be like you're floating." After he quit the project, Fukunaga said in an interview with Variety that New Line Cinema were watering down the movie to make it more conventional and inoffensive, which he said was impossible to do with a Stephen King novel. As for the Muschietti siblings, they've said they weren't prevented from pursuing adult themes in the movie. However, they added that they did have personal limits for how far they wanted to push some scenes or ideas. For example, in an interview with Mad Movies magazine, they said they cut a scene of a kid being thrown into the toilet after having his back broken, because they felt it was really too much to portray visually. By the way, if you'd like to see even more of the concept art and amazing behind the scenes details I discussed in this video, be sure to take a look at the World of It book. I've added links to that in the video description below. Now, Welcome to Derry itself also has some fascinating deleted scenes, and I'll have a video out on those once the finale's over. I'll add a link here so you can watch it when it's ready. And be sure to subscribe to get notified. Thanks for watching and see you next time, yippee-ki-yay movie lovers!